That's great. I will go on mute.
Wonderful. All right, here we are. I've been so excited for this second event here, the three keys to overcoming emotional eating masterclass. And this is, such an exciting time for me because I love sharing this information with people. It's not something that we're hearing a lot out there. And so it's so important for me to have this space with all of you to be able to bring you this information. I'm your host, Lori Montry. I'm a trauma informed eating psychology coach. And that's just a fancy way of saying that I hope you understand why you have your challenges with food and what you can do to finally overcome them through the lens of trauma and the nervous system. I am not going to teach you the exact food plan that you need to follow in order to be able to lose weight and have freedom. I'm not going to teach you how to use your willpower or how to restrict yourself. I'm here to help you develop a healthy, nourishing relationship with food. It is my job to get you free. So I have a whole wall of certifications in behavior change, nervous system regulation, yoga therapy for trauma recovery, somatic experiencing parts work, um, all kinds of different modalities. But the thing that really makes me an expert and makes me able to talk about this with you today is my own 30-year challenge with food and my body. 18 years ago, I was still struggling every day, actually, with my relationship with food. My body and my health was getting worse every day. I had extra weight. I had food intolerances and troubles with my digestive system, aches, pains, mood issues, and a lot more. And I remember one day sitting at the table, I think I was probably writing out my list of things to do to contribute to my feeling of overwhelm. And I remember just being so just completely overwhelmed with what was going on between, my job and my family, my relationship, but mostly the struggle with my food and my body. So before I really was conscious of what was happening, I was reaching into the refrigerator and I was getting out half a leftover cake. And I remember saying to myself, oh, it's okay to have a few bites. But I knew full well that there was no way that I was going to have a few bites of that cake. That was just a little game that I would play with myself in order to kind of open the door and get started with the food. And so I sat down with it. There was no plate. There was no attempt to understand why I was about to plow through thousands of calories and tons of sugar. I just checked out. I didn't want to know what was going on inside because whatever it was, I knew it was more than I could handle. I wanted relief from that overwhelm and that pain in that moment. And this was a behavior that I had done countless times for over 3 decades. It started when I was around 4 years old as a result of some traumatic experiences in my life. And while I now understand why I began emotional eating, that day with the cake was terrifying because I had no idea why I was doing it and I didn't know how I could ever stop doing it. And what I did know is that I was betraying myself again with the food. I was literally hurting myself, but at the same time, I didn't know any other way to help myself. But this time with the cake, it was just a tiny bit different because I asked myself a question. And that question was so simple, but it was so relevant and profound for me that it started to open the door for more questions, and more questions led to more answers. And that question was, what would it be like to not need this cake right now? And I told you it was a really simple question, but it was powerful because it allowed me to see beyond that stuck moment that I was in. And it also allowed me to see that I needed that cake. I wasn't eating it because I was a willpower weakling or because I was a gluttonous pig. I needed something in that moment. Now, granted, the cake was a very maladaptive way of meeting my needs, but it was meeting my needs nonetheless. And recognizing that kind of for the first time really started to shift things for me. And even though, I still finished that half a cake, I still felt sick and miserable and completely ashamed of myself. But that experience, I cracked something open in that experience and began to ask a lot more questions. And those questions led me on a journey where I devoured courses and information and research on the topic of emotional eating. And then I studied for over 2 years to become a Nuaria method trainer and mentor. And the Nuaria method is a deep dive into neuroplasticity and behavior change. And then I went on to work in somatic experiencing and dove into the world of trauma and how it affects our nervous system and our relationship with food. So, as I applied all of my newly acquired knowledge to my own 30-year dysfunctional relationship with food, I was able to achieve food and body freedom. And this was something I never imagined possible. I thought the best thing that I could hope for was maybe to learn how to control it, but to not think about food when I was hungry, unless I was hungry, and to be able to stop when I felt just right, to not be consumed by those thoughts or my efforts to have to try to control myself or my weight. I never thought that that was possible. But as I learned to honor and process my emotions without needing any kind of coping mechanism, as I learned to trust myself with food, I knew that I had to leave my career as a lawyer in order to help other people find that same freedom. It took me a long time to overcome my challenges with food, because mostly because emotional eating is a very multifaceted challenge. And if you don't have all of the pieces together, it's almost impossible to overcome. Real change isn't possible without the various pieces. It's also really challenging because we have to eat, right? We can't just swear off food like we can with some things and just have them out of our space. So it is something that is very, very challenging to overcome. But I don't want it to take other people years on top of what they've already spent to achieve freedom. So I worked really hard to create the Freedom from Emotional Eating course, which is brings together, it's a very comprehensive program that brings together all the pieces to overcome emotional eating once and for all. So today I want to share a little bit about the 3 keys to overcoming emotional eating. Then I want to tell you how you can start your own path towards food and body freedom right away. Again, I already mentioned what I'm not going to tell you is how you can control yourself, how to restrict yourself, because controlling and white knuckling is not freedom. So, as we begin this masterclass, I'd love to start this masterclass in particular with a really profound quote. And that quote is, "Today me will live in the moment unless it's unpleasant, in which case me will eat a cookie." That quote, of course, is from Cookie Monster. And that's exactly what this masterclass is about. It's about learning to live in the moment, even the unpleasant ones, without needing the cookie. And my hope for our time together is at the end of this masterclass, you have a better understanding, a clear understanding, in fact, where your challenges with food come from and what you can do to finally change them. This is not about fixing yourself. Your brain and your nervous system are actually working exactly as they are designed to do. But when you understand how they work, you can harness their power to create real change for your life. So you're in the right place if you are ready to take charge of your weight, your health, the way you nourish your body, the way then you want to feel empowered around food to make choices that are in alignment with your overall goals. You want to eat only when you're hungry, stop when you feel just right, and not think about food all the time. You want to be able to feel your emotions and navigate life without using food as a way to numb, cope, or avoid. You want to feel light and free in your body. You want food and body freedom. So, I want to remind you that I did create a few integration exercises for you to use alongside with the information that I'm giving you in the masterclass. I very intentionally made these exercises just tiny bite sized things that you can just try on just to get a sense of some of the work that can start to help you get free. Knowledge is wonderful, it is 100% necessary, but by itself, it doesn't create change. To actually change, we need integration. And so, if you need the link to the workbook or don't have it, let me know because I think it's very valuable for you to take a look at those exercises and just spend a few minutes trying them on. I'm also going to share with you towards the end how you can be invited to join the Freedom from Emotional Eating course. So we have a lot to cover, a lot of great information to share with you. Let me just kind of take a second to zoom out and tell you kind of where we are in the world right now. More than 2/3 of Americans are overweight. 2/3, 40% fall into the category of obese. Worldwide, more than 39% of adults and 1 in 5 children worldwide are overweight. Okay, so that's one piece. Additionally, we know that almost all of us have experienced trauma of some kind. We live in a stressed out, chronically overwhelmed society, and the majority of us are living with nervous systems that are stuck in survival. Okay, so that's another piece. Now, research clearly links trauma, your nervous system, and eating behaviors. So, if we want to solve the obesity epidemic, we really have to understand this connection and approach change through the lens of trauma and the nervous system. And this masterclass is a great place for you to start to understand why you have tried so hard to change your behaviors with food, but haven't been able to yet. So here's a high level overview of the three keys that we're going to touch on tonight. Key number one is your habituated brain. So we're going to explore how your brain's habits keep you trapped in a cycle of turning to food robotically, even though your best intentions are to do otherwise. Key number two, we're going to talk about is this connection that I mentioned between trauma, your nervous system, and your relationship with food, because nervous system dysregulation lies at the root of almost all emotional eating. And we're not going to solve this problem by just trying harder unless we get to the root. Key number three deals with emotional resiliency. So, this is where you can gain the tools to notice and feel and process your emotions so that you can free yourself from needing to use food as a way to numb, cope, or distract. So, let's dive into key number one, which is your habituated brain. Have you ever heard the phrase, what wires together, fires together? Basically, what this means is that when you repeat a behavior, enough times, your beautiful, efficiency seeking brain creates a strong neurological pathway for that behavior, such that the behavior gets easier and easier to perform it every time you do it. You can think of these neurological pathways kind of like the ruts of the old wagon trains that went out west in the late 1890s, right? Especially in the spring, we get a lot of rain. These heavy wagons would come through, and they would form these deep ruts in the ground. And if your wagon got caught in one of those ruts, it'd be really hard to get your wagon out. Now, in many cases, the efficiency of your brain is absolutely brilliant, right? It's what allows you to go to sleep every night with minty fresh breath because you automatically, robotically brushed your teeth. It's also what allows you to be driving down the road doing 15 other things. You see a yellow light, your foot immediately goes off the gas and goes onto the brake, right? Well, you don't even think about it. It just happens because you have done that behavior so many times. There's a strong neurological pathway associated with it. Now, if you repeat behaviors over and over, that deep groove is formed and you have a habit, which means you can do the behavior without even thinking about it. And this is especially true when the behavior brings about some reward, like the dopamine hit you get when you eat food. And habits are awesome, unless they're not. Sometimes you may prefer that your efficiency seeking brain wasn't necessarily as efficient as it is, like when it comes to emotional eating. Because once those neurological pathways have been established, because you ate because of certain emotions or because in certain situations, it literally feels like you have no other choice but to eat when those emotions or when those situations are present for you. It's like you become a robot that's been programmed to act in this certain way. It's kind of like, when once your brain becomes patterned and you're in that triggering situation, your brain's like, oh, okay, Lori, you don't even worry about this. I know exactly what to do. I'm going to take us to the pantry, to the food. You can just check out because I got this, right? You taught me what to do in this situation. Brain thinks it's helping you. I mean, why would you have done that so many times unless it was a really good idea? So at this point, it may feel next to impossible to choose something different. Eating is just too easy. So it's important to understand that part of the reason why we are challenged with emotional eating is just due to the habituated pathways of our efficiency seeking brain. But I want to assure you that this is only your default system. We're not doomed to keep making choices that are out of alignment with our long term goals and who we really want to be. We do have the power to override our default system when we use and have access to our higher brain. We're going to talk a lot about our higher brains tonight, but it's basically, I'm talking about our prefrontal cortex, this beautiful part of our brains that make us human. This part of our brain, when we have access, can override that pleasure seeking default system and allow us to be conscious and intentional in moments where we used to be automatic and robotic. So, this is basically a fancy, the fancy word for this is self-directed neuroplasticity. But really all it is when we intentionally rewire our brains to create wanted habits and remove unwanted habits by engaging your higher brain and bringing conscious intention into your behavior. And the really good news is we have a ton at this point, we have a ton of research that tells us exactly how to go about doing that, how to work with our habits in a really effective way. I teach people a ladder building method of change that every 7 days we build a new rung from where you are to where you want to be. Because usually the approach that we try to take, I know I'm not alone in this, is usually we're here, we want to be up here 20 feet in the air, and we're just going to jump, right? We're just going to jump and try to reach that goal 20 feet in the air. We're going to only drink smoothies for the next 3 months, right? To lose the weight. We're going to get our mail forwarded to the gym because that's where we're going to be all the time. We're going to jump all in and go all or nothing with it, right? And nobody jumps 20 feet in the air. It's not possible. And so we just end up getting frustrated and that sense of failure. And we give up for a while again until we're ready to try to jump 20 feet in the air again. But just imagine where you would be right now if instead of that all or nothing behavior, you built a ladder one rung by rung up to where you want to go, right? You'd been there so long ago, and that's the approach that we can take that makes it so much easier. So imagine, instead of that on again, off again, all or nothing that you probably engaged with over the last few years, or in my case, decades. Imagine how far you think you'd be if you had been able to build yourself a ladder. So learning to build and break habits really does allow you to stop relying on your willpower. And this is something I really want you to hear because your willpower is like a muscle. And just like any other muscle, it gets fatigued. So you may have noticed, you wake up in the morning, hopefully after a good night of sleep, and you've got all this willpower. You can make good choices, absolutely. But then as the day kind of goes on, you find yourself, it's more and more difficult to even be conscious and intentional, let alone make good choices. So this is because your willpower muscle gets really fatigued. It gets fatigued by every single interaction that you have to have. It gets fatigued by every decision that you have to make, from what to wear to what route to take to work, and so on. And so this means that it's really ineffective for you to rely on your willpower when you're trying to create new habits. Sometimes it might be there, and sometimes it may be too tired to help you out. So that's why we build that ladder and you rely on your ladder rungs as opposed to your willpower. These small goals can be met much more easily without relying on willpower. And then you get to watch yourself succeed. And that's incredibly motivating. Now, of course, I dive much deeper into habituated pathways, into habit building in the Freedom from Emotional Eating course, but I did give you a little bit of integration work specifically for habits in the integrative workbook. So I encourage you to kind of play around with that exercise that's in there and see if you can just start to bring a little bit more conscious intention into your everyday, especially those behaviors that you find yourself doing very robotically and automatically. So now we can move into key number two. And when I say these keys and I'm treating them separately, they're mixed together. So it's kind of silly on one hand to separate them out, but it makes sense for the purposes of us understanding it to do that. But just know that there's so much overlap, and these are very much intermingled together, as you're going to see. If you can't really just work on one without the other two. They don't allow themselves to be worked on individually. They have to come together. So key number two, as I said in the beginning, is really looking at that connection between trauma, your nervous system, and your relationship with food. And this is such a missing piece in the treatment and in the healing of emotional eating. It's starting to be talked about a little bit more, but man, it is just so essential. And so it is, even though it's been a missing piece, we're starting to bring it in and really understand how incredibly instrumental it is in overcoming any kind of behavior actually that is unwanted. So, and the way I learned how important this was not only from my own personal experience, but early on in my practice, when I first started, I had two groups of people. I had one group who was taking the tools and integrating them and using them, and they were having incredible results. Their relationship with food was changing very quickly, and they were losing weight, and things were going amazing. And I'm like, yes, these are the right tools. But then I had a group of people who couldn't get themselves to use the tools. And I couldn't figure out why, right? And if I had asked them, they would have said, "Oh, it's because I'm lazy. It's because I'm broken. It's because I'm too far gone." Whatever they would have said, but didn't believe that, and I knew there was something else that was going on. And so that's when I started to take a deep dive into understanding why these people were struggling so much to implement the tools. So my deep dive led me into the trauma work, into the nervous systems and all things somatic. And what I learned is that the reason why many of my clients couldn't implement the tools that I was teaching was because they were in survival. They had dysregulated nervous systems that were stuck in overwhelm. They were literally couldn't take on anything else. So, by working with their nervous systems first and really helping them heal from trauma, giving them back capacity, that was the foundation they needed in order to be able to change their behavior and take their power back with food. So, if you've been struggling with emotional eating for a long time, you haven't been able to make significant changes with your food, I really want you to hear this because there's nothing wrong with you, right? You just may be in a state of survival and overwhelm, and that keeps you stuck in unwanted patterns. So that's why all of my work with people, no matter what it is going to begin with laying that foundation of a healthy nervous system. Because when your nervous system is regulated and you have capacity, you have access to that higher brain that I was talking about with key one, and you can actually be present in those triggered moments. And instead of just going the automatic route, you can make conscious decision. Now, I've worked with literally thousands of people who have said, I tried everything. I felt like I had literally tried everything. Um, but the key to change was really this learning about my nervous system. This work has been truly the foundation upon which all the other things that you want to be able to stick with and do is built. And this is, of course, the second key to overcoming emotional eating. In order to understand this key, it's so important that I want to dive in a little bit more and just give you a little bit deeper understanding. In order to do that, I want to talk to you a bit about trauma. And the fact is that nearly all of us, probably all of us, have experienced trauma of some kind in our lives. Now, as a society, we tend to have a very narrow view of what trauma is. And it certainly can be, but does not have to be as complex, something like living through a natural disaster or living in a war zone or being a victim or a witness of severe abuse, right? Trauma can result certainly from those things, but it does not have to be rise to that level to be traumatic to us individually. And really the definition of trauma that we now understand is that it is simply something that overwhelms the nervous system of the individual in the moment that this event happened. right? It's just that we couldn't process everything that was happening in that moment. And that's really what trauma is all about. So obviously it's very different. What might be traumatic to me might not be to another person, depending on a lot of factors like the resources that the person has available, the capacity of the individual, what else was going on, the support that the person had. So I've developed a graduated cylinder model that helps us to talk about and understand our nervous systems. And I like this model because it helps us understand it kind of in more of a over your lifetime. Okay. So remember those tall graduated cylinders that we used to have in chemistry class when we would do our experiments? We'd pour stuff in and they would have numbers running on them from 1 to 10 up the side. And those numbers we can use to represent the state of our nervous system. So when our cylinders are full in the 1 to 3 range, that's when we're in our parasympathetic, ventral vagal, rest and digest phase, the state. This is where we are safe, we feel social, we feel calm, alive, resourced, kind of just ready for life. And then as we move up the cylinder, when we're in that, say, 4 to 7 range, that's the sympathetic state. And that state is all about mobilization for the sake of survival. It is, we become hyper aware to our environment, hyper vigilant even. And near the top of that range, near the 7 range, everything starts to feel threatening. And when we go beyond that 7, so we go into the, 7 to 10 range, that's the other branch of the parasympathetic known as the dorsal vagal. And that's really the freeze state or the shutdown. Okay. In this state, you feel overwhelmed with a capital O. The thing that sounds like the best idea is going under the bed and staying there, right? Now, it's also possible to overfill our cylinder such that when it's pouring over like that, you are in deep overwhelm and nothing else is getting in. Now, ideally, we would flow kind of fluidly between these states, but we'd spend most of our time in the 1 to 3 range. You might move up into the sympathetic for a moment or even up into the freeze, but there would be a very short period of time and we'd come back relatively quickly. That's how our systems were designed to work optimally. But you may be living with a graduated cylinder that rarely, if ever, comes into the 1 to 3 range. You may spend most of your time in the 7 or above, and there are so many people living in that state. This means that you're living in a state of survival nearly all the time. The other thing about this is that, a lot of times we just become normalized to it. This is just life. And so many people who I start working with say, I didn't even know that I was in this state. And some of the signs are, just everything feels so much. Everything feels like such a big task, and it's hard for me to stick with things. And I have coping behaviors, right? So these are some of the things that help us understand that we may be stuck in survival, even though to us it's just normal life, right? And usually about this time, I'll get people asking, well, how did my cylinder get so full? And it's pretty easy to understand, actually. As you had life experiences that were more intense than you could handle, so remember our definition of trauma, an experience that was more than you could handle in the moment, um, liquid was added to your cylinder. And that's not to say all of your stressful events, not by any means, only the ones that were more intense than you could process in the moment. So there were probably plenty of stressful events that you processed just fine, and they didn't get added, right? These experiences may have felt hard at the time, but because you had the skill, the resources, the capacity to deal with them, they didn't get filled, they didn't go into your cylinder. So these experiences and events that did, however, these are your personal traumas. And even if they didn't seem big enough to count as a trauma at the time, if they were more than your system could handle, they added to your cylinder. So throughout your life, events such as adverse childhood experiences, day-to-day stressors, chronic pain, exposure to molds and toxins, infections, sicknesses, all of these other kind of physiological and psychological stressors that were too much for your system ended up getting added to your cylinder. Even simple everyday occurrences that many people face, such as being bullied, never quite living up to the expectations of others, divorce in your family, living and being raised by a depressed or emotionally unavailable parent. All of these things are very often overwhelming situations for young nervous systems. And once there in your cylinder, the liquid stays there until you learn the skills and tools that help you reduce that liquid. Now, it's important for me to note here that this is all perfectly natural and normal. This is how your survival system was designed to work, right? When you're actually in danger, you want to be hypervigilant and hyper aware of all of the dangers around you. There's nothing broken about this. It's just that we weren't engineered to be on watch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we were only meant to go into survival mode above, say that 4 or so, for brief periods of time and be able to come back down. But as your cylinder got fuller and fuller, things that you could easily manage before get a lot harder and they take a lot more energy. Things like paying your bills or taking a shower. These can start to feel like that's so much to do, so overwhelming. And this is one of the ways that you know that your cylinder has reached that point of being up in the 7, 8, 9 and beyond. And in this state, you're often triggered, right? You feel like you need food to help you cope with life. Conscious choice, impulse control, all of that becomes very difficult when your nervous system is in that state of activation. Your survival system causes you to essentially to reach for food to deal with the fire alarm that is going off within your mind and your body. So, one of the biggest keys that we have to overcome emotional eating is harnessing the power of your nervous system. Because in doing so, you can reduce the liquid in your graduated cylinder, switch out of survival and into your higher functioning brain. Because it's your higher brain that can stop your hand as you're reaching for the chips or the ice cream and ask the question, do I really want this? Or is it an impulse that will pass in a few minutes? But being stuck in survival as a result of past traumas is why you feel like you're on autopilot without the ability to make a choice, about the ability to choose something different. It's why you eat the food and then 30 minutes later, you're like, why the hell did I do that? I said I didn't want to do that anymore. After an emotional eating experience, some of you may feel like, gosh, I don't even feel like I was even there because part of you wasn't, right? Your higher brain wasn't there. So let me take a moment. This is a lot. I know this is a lot of information. So I want to take a moment and just kind of really summarize, just really simply, what I've been talking about for the last few minutes. Okay, I'm going to just take 4 points and share them with you. So first of all, we said almost all of us have experienced those overwhelming events in life that were traumatic in some form, right? Were too much for our nervous systems at some point in our lives. These traumas have altered our nervous systems, causing a state of dysregulation. We may be living in a state of survival and not even really know it because we've become so normalized to it. The third thing is living with this dysregulated nervous system affects our ability to navigate life and especially uncomfortable emotions. So this turns into a more exaggerated need for food as a coping mechanism. And number four, when your nervous system is dysregulated, your survival brain takes over. Okay. Survival brain, when you're dysregulated, survival brain is driving the bus. This is in contrast to your prefrontal cortex, your higher brain. Now, survival brain is concerned with the quickest, easiest way to help you survive the next 2 minutes. It is not concerned about your long-term goals. It has no access to your creativity or your good ideas, your problem-solving capabilities. It isn't concerned how you're going to feel in an hour or even 30 minutes. It just wants you alive in 30 minutes. Okay. So when survival brain is turned on, impulse control gone, right? Your emotions feel more intense and more threatening than usual. And self-soothing or connecting with others is really difficult. And that's why it's so easy in those moments to turn to food. Now, combine that with your habituated pathways that are already developed, like we talked about with key number one, and it feels almost impossible to not turn to food to get regulated. So, for all of these reasons, a really key component of ending emotional eating is rewiring your nervous system so you're not living and operating from survival brain. Survival brain runs to the chips and ice cream. Higher brain can pause and evaluate the situation, make a choice that's aligned with your overall goals. Higher brain knows when you're starting to feel dysregulated and knows the tools and strategies that can help you get back, right? Survival brain is like, oh my God, I feel awful. We got to eat. We got to hurry up and eat because this awful feeling is not going to go away until we eat the food. So just hurry up, do it now, eat, or we're going to die, right? There's like all this urgency to it. And higher brain can actually slow down and say, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? Let me step back, let me take a look. What's actually needed here? How am I going to feel about this in 30 minutes? What else might be available to me, right? It has access to those good ideas and those resourcefulness. So when you have access to higher brain, you're regulated, you're resourced, you're the best version of yourself, right? And this version of you doesn't think about food unless you're actually hungry, and it can override those habituated pathways. So the $1 million question, right? How do I shift from survival brain into higher brain? This sounds awesome, right? Yes, I want to take back my power. And this is something that I mean, the whole course is built around this question, right? How do I get from survival brain to higher brain? And in a nutshell, it's really just involved learning to work with your nervous system in order to switch from survival to higher brain. So in my program, I teach a lot of different modalities for doing that because every system is different, and sometimes we find certain modalities resonate better with certain systems, and also, in different situations, we might need different tools. So we work to build a tool belt, essentially, of your tools that help you learn how to regulate your system. But one of the most powerful tools we have is called somatic experiencing. And this is a modality that's been around for quite a number of decades. And it is very, very powerful in the sense that it speaks the language of the nervous system, right? The nervous system doesn't speak in words. That's why sometimes you may be trying to calm yourself down by talking and with your words, and it might be helpful to some degree, but a lot of times it's not. And one of the reasons is because that's not the language of the nervous system. So, somatic experiencing provides us with a way to get to know our own systems and be able to work with them, and eventually to be able to bring them into a state of regulation without using food or anything else outside of us. So this might be a good time. We've been learning a lot, I've been talking a lot, but it might be a great time for us to just kind of pause and get into the body and maybe do a somatic experiencing exercise together. So the one that I want to do with you now is one, I chose it because almost everybody puts this one in their tool belt. People love it and they tell me all the time, oh, so there I was in this situation and I started to do the VU, and so it's one that I think resonates with a lot of people. It's one that's very easy. And the reason why it works is because it vibrates something called the polyvagal nerve. Maybe you've heard of it. Our polyvagal nerve is a cranial nerve, runs from the base of our neck down into our pelvic region. It regulates our nervous system. It has a lot to do with our breathing, our digestion. And the VU is an exercise that works to vibrate this nerve, and that vibration helps to regulate our system. And so it's very simple. I'll explain it and then we can try it together. We just take a couple of nice deep breaths in. And then when we're ready on our exhale, we'll do a nice long exhale. And while we do it, we'll bring it up from the bottom, from our deep in our belly, and we'll use that VU sound to vibrate the polyvagal nerve. And we'll see, there's no expectation that it's going to produce any particular result for you, but it might be interesting and fun to play with. So what we can do is just kind of start by getting back into our bodies. Like I said, we've been in our heads, really focusing and digesting this material. So, getting into our bodies, I like to start by just feeling my feet flat on the floor, feeling the ground underneath me supporting me, meeting me, pulling me down, having me close. And then we can just kind of work up through the body and notice whatever we might be experiencing. Then we can take a couple of deep breaths, and after, when we feel ready, we'll go ahead and on our exhale, we'll bring that breath up through the belly and we'll make the VU sound, which will then vibrate the polyvagal nerve. Let's go on the next one. Ready? Inhale. VU. We'll just let that integrate for a second. Don't worry about if your VU was short or long, high or low, deep, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just let it integrate and just notice what you might be experiencing. Might not be anything, which is also something to notice, right? Very often, it takes us a little bit of time, a little bit of practice to develop a somatic practice of our own. Our nervous system might not be used to being worked with, and it may take a little while. Usually, when we're doing the VU, we might do 3 or 4 in a row just to kind of, really get more of a full effect. But these are the kind, and there's many different kinds, but this is one example of somatic experiencing and how it can powerfully start to work with your nervous system to keep you in a state of safe, social, alive, calm, that 1 to 3 range that I was talking about on the cylinders. So I'd love to hear anybody in the chat have any particular experience with the VU. uh, I was while I wait for you guys to just put in a word or two, I recently, well, I guess it's been a little over a year now, was a mentor in a big somatic experiencing class. I had probably over 500 people, and we would break out in groups and then come back together. And it was always so fascinating to me when we come back together, and the facilitator would take a few people's examples, and one person might say, oh my gosh, that was the best experience ever, I feel so relaxed. Another person might come back and say, oh my gosh, I felt so triggered. Somebody might say, I love to have my eyes closed. Another person say, no way, I would not feel comfortable with my eyes closed. So it really just goes to show how different all of our systems are. And so the real key here is learning to work with your system rather than me just giving you, okay, here's some magical potion for you. You get to know your system and try things on. So one of the comments said, felt a little lightheaded. Yeah, that can happen if you're holding it for a long time, maybe beyond what would be comfortable. But then felt relaxed. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, it's just fun to try that on and give you a little sense of what somatic experiencing really is. Trying this tomorrow, sitting at the table with my family. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing too. And it can be a little weird. It is something that I mean, around my family now, they're used to it. So they'll be like, oh, mom's booing. What's going on? But yeah, I get that. So, but there are many, many exercises too that we build knowing that we may be sitting in the middle of a meeting or, in some other place that we can't bust these kinds of practices out, right? So there's a lot of things that we learn to do that can really help us that no one would have any idea that we were working with our nervous system. So let's see. Yes, that's another piece of integration that I gave you. I invite you to just check in with your nervous system a few times during the day. Rate it on that scale that I gave you, 1 to 10. And then maybe try the VU a couple of times and see how it impacts, where you are on the spectrum. Wonderful. All right. So, just thinking about this, Can you see how you might have been in the past, maybe putting your time, energy, resources into things that aren't actually helpful with respect to emotional eating? How do I control myself? How do I trick myself? How do I, and basically ignore the need that's really there, right? And that's never going to work. We're never going to win over our survival system. We're just not supposed to. So learning to work with it instead has really been the key that makes it just kind of happen very organically and naturally. So let's move into key number three. This is probably the most obvious key when we talk about emotional eating is being able to navigate our emotions without needing food to cope with them or to run away from them or to numb them, because sometimes they are very painful, sometimes they are very intense, and we don't feel like we can be in the moment with them without doing something to relieve some of that pain or some of that intensity. So, most of us, we weren't taught how to notice, how to be with and process our emotions. Maybe we were told that we shouldn't be so emotional, or we were always encouraged to look on the bright side. But for the most part, we weren't really told anything at all about our emotions or how to handle them. So most of us grow up thinking that the best way to deal with difficult emotions is to get rid of those bad feelings as quickly as possible. The idea of simply sitting with them, allowing them and hearing them, and allowing them to pass through is a very foreign concept to most people. Now, you may think that if you have the ability to just avoid them or make yourself feel better, that you're doing all you can. But the problem is your coping mechanisms and avoidance mechanisms might be hurting you in the end, like with emotional eating. And this applies to all the things that we do to numb, distract, and avoid. And number two, because you aren't actually dealing with the emotion, you tend to struggle with the same difficult emotions day after day after day. If you want to end emotional eating, you have to hear this. The answer is never to push your emotions down or to simply try to make them go away. Emotions are energy. They have to be metabolized and discharged. When you hold the energy of the emotions in your body, you experience illness, addiction, nervous system dysregulation, a whole host of other challenges. So denying, stuffing our emotions is also very harmful to our psyche because it's the ultimate form of abandonment. So imagine if a little child came to you and said, "Help me, I'm hurting, I need you." And you said, "Here, cookies, you deal with her. I don't know what to do. Just, here, you deal with it, cookies." That's essentially what we do to the part of us that is feeling and experiencing those emotions. So the third key here to overcoming emotional eating is to make friends with your emotions, to allow the energy to be felt and released rather than stuffed down in the body. Now, at this point, a lot of people, they'll always say, "Oh no, Lori, I am feeling my emotions. Trust me," because they feel really awful. But what's usually happening is that we are trying so hard to keep our emotions away from us. We're aware that the emotion is there, but instead of actually allowing it and being with it and flowing with it, we are trying to keep away from it, okay? And it's like this. Imagine your emotions are a heavy brick, and trying to keep them away is trying to hold that brick out far away from your body. It is extremely hard. After just a couple of minutes, you would have to try to do all these things, prop your arm, and try to find different positions because it's literally exhausting, right? But if you brought that brick in and held it close to your body, it would be very light. It would be so much easier. And that's what it's like with our emotions when we truly learn how to be with them. And this is something we don't only have to learn to deal with our emotions, but through the other work that we can do, we can understand them and they can shine a light for us on the places that where we may be getting caught up in old unhelpful thought patterns, or there may be wounds that we need to heal. And the emotions are just alerting us to that. So when we listen to the emotions and allow them to guide us and navigate us, we can overcome old thought patterns that are causing these emotions in the first place. We can heal wounds that are causing these emotions. And then we're not even in the triggered place in the first place. So our emotions are very, very powerful. But I get it, if you are not used to feeling your emotions and you don't have the skills and the tools right now, it feels really incredibly um, threatening to do so. So just like with the other tools that we have, we build a ladder rung from where we are to where we want to be able to feel our emotions. Um, because remember, stuffing them down is never the answer, right? Um, it also, when we ignore our emotions, it shuts us down to a whole gorgeous part of you that we need to feel if we're going to become whole and complete and the totality of who we are as human beings. So even though it may sound hard, learning how to feel your emotions is such an incredible achievement, not only because then you don't need to use food, and that's wonderful, right? That's definitely an improvement, but it also opens you up to who you really are and allows you to do some healing and some changing of your underlying thinking. So I also have a little bit of integration work for you in the workbook to just kind of get to know your emotions a little bit more. These are some of the common emotions that we just experience as humans. Being able to befriend your emotions is a really brilliant step in letting them become your guidance system. I mean, imagine being able to feel boredom, overwhelm, shame, anxiety, loneliness, or other emotions without using food to have to cope with them or numb them. This is truly freedom, right? So, these are the three keys to overcoming emotional eating. And you could probably see how you have been maybe putting a lot of your time and energy into unhelpful methods to change it. But if you're ready to put time and energy into these three keys, I know you can make permanent, lasting change. So let me spend a few moments now telling you about the Freedom from Emotional Eating program. It is a 16 module program that will change your relationship with food and your life. It is centered around the three keys that we've been talking about. There's other pieces that come in, but these are the backbone of the work. And within this 16 weeks, you're going to understand exactly why you struggle, the tools that you can use to overcome these challenges. And then by staying consistent with the tools, you're going to step into your power, be able to stop emotional eating, and experience incredible shifts in the rest of your life as well. So the program is for people who turn to food to deal with emotions or dysregulated states of being. For you, if you feel shame, guilt, or despair around your eating behaviors and your weight, if you want to lose weight, or maybe if you don't have weight to lose, but you want to nourish your body better, but you just don't tend to make those choices consistently. You want to make conscious choices with food that are in alignment, right, with the health and the overall vitality that you want for your body. And you realize that the answer to food and body freedom is not the next quick fix that will have you right back where you are today or worse off. So this program is very, very unique in the inclusions. First of all, I took the data that I was collecting over the years and I'm continually refining and making it better and better. And I see the pieces that are needed in order for people to be successful. Number one, that includes the comprehensive online curriculum, includes 16 modules. So each module has a series of videos that teaches the topic of the week, and everything in this program is very bite-sized. You're not expected to spend hours and hours on the program every week. I learned maybe the hard way that I can give you all the best information in the world, but if it's more than you can take in and assimilate and integrate, it's useless to you. So the program is very much designed for someone who's already feeling some degree of overwhelm, right? That's the name of the game here. So I've got to be able to work with that. So don't make an excuse to yourself that this isn't a good time, or you don't have the capacity because your life is busy right now. This is why it was created for people who are in some degree of survival and overwhelm. So in addition to the modules, the videos, every module has a full integration workbook. And these are the practices that help you take the knowledge you're learning in the videos and then apply it to your life, your circumstances, your challenges. And this is crucial because knowledge is absolutely the first step, right? It's not that we don't need knowledge, but knowledge doesn't create change, integration does. And so the integration workbook provides a step-by-step way to bring that knowledge into your life and your circumstances. I also mentioned that there is the full somatic library. That library is made up of 40 videos, 40 different somatic experiencing exercises that I lead you through, because this is really the easiest and most meaningful way for you to be able to build a practice of your own. And so that is incredible resource. There's a lot of bonus materials like meditations, practices for dealing with in the moment triggers. There's a video you can watch that is meant for those times. Oh, I'm feeling really triggered and I want to go to food. If you can get yourself to watching this video and doing it a few times, you can actually reprogram your brain to be able to take control in the moment when you are feeling triggered around food. And then there's tracking tables and things because I want to make it really easy for you to know exactly what you're focusing on from week to week. So this is the inclusion for everybody who signs up. And then on top of the online course itself, there's live support in a couple of different ways. Um, the first is through live coaching 2 times a week for 16 weeks in group form. And I love this so much. The people, when we come together and we share the experiences, and you get to watch them being coached through their challenges, through something sticky that they're having trouble integrating. It makes you realize, oh my gosh, I am so not the only one. And there's a really incredible special bond that is created in that space. Having been in the coaching world for a long time, both as a coach and the coacher, I know one thing is for certain: people with accountability, support, and guidance do way better than those without. Even Tony Robbins' data shows that 95% of people who purchase online programs without any support along with them will fail to even finish the program. So, especially a program like this, that's really meant to help you establish a sense of safety and support, you need live support. So this is, the 2 meetings every week. The meetings are recorded and then kept on the course page so that attendance at every single meeting is not required. And you always have the ability to submit your questions so that even if you can't be there live for one reason or another, you're covered. Okay. I keep the groups very, very small by industry standards, and this is important for me because in order to help you and support you, I have to know you. And so our groups are very small. But maybe you're someone who says, the group option might not be for me, or maybe the time that I offer it doesn't work for you, or I really want to go at my own pace. And that is absolutely understandable. So for you, I offer the program a la carte, which means you have total access to the full program, all of its resources, but without the bi-weekly coaching. And with this option, you can still get support in a couple ways. One is that you can ask specific questions about the course through email, and you can also schedule one-on-one calls with me that accommodate your schedule. So whether you choose group coaching or going through the program on your own, you have what you need to make real lasting change with your relationship with food and your life. So I really want to encourage you guys just to be open, right, to the idea of taking the next step with me. You absolutely deserve freedom. And I know it's absolutely possible for you with the right information, the integration and intention. I do realize that I shared a lot of information with you all today. And so I am setting aside time on the 1st of February at 6 p.m., which is going to be a Q&A about the program. So you can come and, digest some of what you've heard here and really think about whether or not you're feeling ready to take this step and what other questions you might have about the program. I also have a few spots that I opened on my calendar. If you're somebody who says, yes, I'm ready to make the next to take that next step, but I really want to make sure it's the best fit for me or something like that, I'd love to jump on with you and help you make that decision. So the link to schedule that, as well as the link to check out the program a little bit more, is going to be in the email you'll receive tomorrow with this replay. So all of that will be easy for you. If you just want to look for that, you'll have everything you need. And of course, you can always reach out to me at Lori@LoriMontry.com, which is my email, and we can make sure you have everything you need. But as we wrap up tonight, does anybody have a question that they're thinking about from now? I'd be happy to answer that for you. Okay. Well, I certainly want to thank you for spending time with me, allowing me to share this information with you. It's one of my favorite things to do because I know oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I know for me, learning, oh, wait, what? I'm not broken. I'm not this incredible willpower weakling. Wow, there could be another answer. That was really exciting for me. And so I love sharing this information. I look forward to answering any questions or potentially working with you to get you free. So I'd love to see you at the February 1st Q&A. But you'll have the other links to check things out, and please reach out with any questions. I really love to answer your questions. And if the discovery call feels right to you, jump on the calendar and we will have a little time together. All right, ladies, thank you so much. It's great to be with you. Have a beautiful night, and I'll see you soon.